Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. The Union Cabinet on Tuesday approved a proposal to update the National Population Register, which is linked to the census. The exercise will cost around 8,500 crore rupees, the government said. Now, the Census Commission has said that the objective of the NPR is to create a comprehensive identity database of every usual resident of the country. The database will have demographic details. A usual resident for the NPR is a person who has lived in an area for at least 6 months or more, or a person who intends to live in an area for the next 6 months or more. It is mandatory for every usual resident of India to register in the NPR. The NPR, since it is linked to the census, is seen as the first step towards a nationwide exercise to implement the National Register of Citizens. Though an NPR doesn't necessarily mean it's guaranteed there will be an NRC, it clears the path for a nationwide citizens list. This is seen as one of the reasons why some states like West Bengal and Kerala, which are opposed to the NRC, have stopped work on the NPR. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will take a closer look at the National Population Register. Joining me on the program today are J. Sai Deepak, Advocate of the Supreme Court; P.K. Malhotra, former Secretary, Ministry of Law and Justice, Government of India; and K.V. Prasad, Senior Associate Editor, The Tribune. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Mr. Malhotra, let me begin the program with you. Let's first try and understand what the National Population Register really is.
You see, the National Population Register, this is not a new concept. First time this was done with the census, last census, which took place in 2011, and before that census, this exercise of National Population Register was taken over. It contains the basic demographic data of the individual residing in a particular area. As you have said in your opening remarks, any person, it's not confined to the citizens, any person who is living in that area for the last 6 months or intends to live in a particular area for more than 6 months, whether he is a citizen or not a citizen, his record is required to be entered into the National Population Register. This is the basic idea of collecting data under the National Population Register, is that it gives a base to the government to formulate its policies for the future for a particular community, for a particular area, for depending on the requirement of that particular area and the kind of population which is living there. So this kind of data is definitely essential, and it helps government in formulating its policy. What in NPR is collected is the basic data with regard to the name, father's name, mother's name, age, qualification, profession. These are the basic documents which are collected in this. And probably this time what they are going to do is, in addition to demographic data collection, they are also going to collect the biometric data also.
Well, that's not being collected.
But that is also because, but this is not mandatory. Under the law, this is not mandatory. If somebody want to share that data, probably that will be collected under this also. And this exercise is going to start from the month of April, which will continue up to September. And then in 2021, the census will take place. And probably this is a precursor to that. And one point which you have raised is with regard to connecting with the national NRC, that is the National Register of Citizens. I think probably this will be a basic document, and the data collected under this basic document can be utilized for the purpose of preparing a NRC or the National Register of Citizens. But it is not necessary that if you are collecting if you are preparing NPR, then definitely it will lead to creation of NRC. This is not mandatory, but this data becomes necessary from the government point of view. And as I said, this is not being done for the first time. It has been done in 2010, and in 2015 it was updated, and now before the census, again the government is trying to update that data.
Okay, all right. K. Prasad, what is the purpose really of the NPR, and where do you see this going?
No, as Mr. Malhotra explained, this is part of a regular ongoing exercise where we periodically update the data available on the citizens who are in the country and also others who come visiting here. They could be within migration within the country or from outside, both ways. That gives you an idea as to what kind of people are with you, and what kind of, I think even while announcing the NPR today, the minister, Mr. Javadekar, did mention the fact that this will help the government better target the schemes that it intends to bring or has brought for the people whose benefit it is intended to. Because one of the biggest complaints has always been the siphoning off or the leakages into various welfare measures. And remember, it was, I think, the UPA government, when it was towards the last, launched what became the biometric based targeted beneficiary system, which eventually turned into the DBT, and then we moved on those lines. So this is all using the available technology. Even at that point in time, I remember the then Home Minister said that this is not a perfect exercise, but please give us time to let it stabilize. So I think this time they're trying to do is, I think the minister did make an announcement that they're bringing in an app through which you can feed the data, and the announcement they made is no documents required. Whatever you say, the government will take it at the face value. So I think that is one of the biggest the takeaways at the briefing today.
Okay, all right. J. Deepak, how is the NPR different from the NRC, first and foremost, and are they at some level intertwined?
So the question should be, under which legislative framework is the National Population Register being undertaken, and where does it find any mention at all? I think the relevant document would be the Citizenship Rules of 2003. Under that, Rule 3 specifically speaks of a National Register of Citizens. Rule 4 speaks of a preparation of a National Register of Citizens for the rest of India. Rule 4A speaks of a National Register of Citizens for Assam. That's the distinction. So under Rule 3, there is a sub-rule 4 that specifically says that the government may by order actually undertake or create a national population register, and this is seen as part of an exercise that ultimately converges in a national register of citizens, at least based on the framework that is available. In other words, simply put, the rule that deals with the creation of a national register of citizens specifically contains a sub-rule which allows the government to maintain and create a national population register. Therefore, it could be a standalone activity, or ultimately it could aid in the process of a national NRC, because it specifically forms part of a provision that deals with a national NRC. That much is clear. Now, where is this going and what could happen? Simply speaking, population is equal to citizens plus non-citizens, simple. Okay. Therefore, population is effectively a head count, and from there you could proceed to an NRC and have some clear picture with respect to who are the non-citizens. Are they necessarily illegal migrants? That's a different question altogether, because not all non-citizens are necessarily illegal migrants. Therefore, this is effectively going towards, according to me, a greater clarity with respect to not just demographic composition, but also with respect to, let's say, creating a database which allows the government to use the database for further objectives. But the one question that perhaps people could ask legitimately is, you have an Aadhaar, then you're going for a population register, then you have an NRC. So in how many phases and how many cycles will data be collected, and to what end would the data be put to use? I think there are a significant number of policy researchers who would want to know what is the purpose of this particular data and how is the data going to be used. Be that as it may, it's not as if the National Population Register as an exercise is being undertaken for the very first time. And it has a statutory sanction, it has a legislative sanction, so to speak. Therefore, there can't be any questions with respect to that. Plus, its use for NRC is also legislatively recognized since 2003 at the very least. Therefore, these questions, if they are raised at this particular point, could only be based on what is happening around us at this stage, but they've been around for quite some time. That much is very, very clear. So, I think the other thing perhaps the government may want to consider as part of this entire exercise is, if it is looking at expeditious detection and deportation of illegal migrants, perhaps it could consider putting in place the recommendations of the 175th Law Commission report with respect to creating a separate force for illegal migration, for detection of illegal migrants, and establishing more tribunals, and also changing the quasi-judicial nature of Foreigners Tribunal established under the Foreigners Tribunal Order of 1964 under the Foreigners Act of 1946. These are some issues that could perhaps look into, because ultimately the organizing principles of any state is security. Right. Beyond that, there is nothing else. That's the primary thing. Therefore, it's not just a question of, let's say, ensuring that the schemes that the government comes out with reaches out to the people, but you also have to know who lives in this country. That's a fundamental question that every government and every sovereign state has a right to ask and answer.
Okay, all right. So, since we are here, KV Prasad, Why is it then that some states are against the NPR and have said that they don't want to go ahead with it? States like Kerala, states like West Bengal, and now the latest being Andhra Pradesh joining that bandwagon.
I think part of it stems from the legislative and the administrative orders that has Mr. Sai Deepak just mentioned about it, and also around the current state of affairs following the Citizenship Amendment Bill. The kind of political atmosphere that has and the kind of debate that has triggered protests that have come up in various places. So this is parties which are in power in those states have a viewpoint which is different from the parties which are ruling the coalition in the center. So I think that's also springs out of that. It was more of a political, I think, in nature rather than, and then they have the, of course, just about a few days ago there was a reports in various newspapers quoting sources or quoting highly placed officials in the Ministry of Home Affairs, wherein even on the implementation of Citizen Amendment Bill, they said there could be an authority settled by the Act of Center. It's not the states which have to do it. Whereas in this case, we just heard Prakash Javadekar, the minister, tell us that all these states had issued notifications. It's only now they have stopped the work. So there is some kind of, I think, the political element has crept into this whole process.
You know, that having been said, Mr. Malhotra, can the states block it?
No, I think the reservation which is being expressed by the states is not with regard to the National Register of Citizen or the National Register of Population, but the issue has arisen because of, as rightly pointed out, because of the apprehensions which have been expressed by a particular quarter with regard to the implementation of the Citizenship Amendment Act. Now, if you look at that, because the Citizenship Amendment Act itself has been challenged in the court and some of the states are not supporting it, therefore they have stopped this work. But the question which you have asked, whether the state can stop it, I think my answer is very clear. Whether it is the Citizenship Act or it is the census, they fall in list 1 of 7 schedule of the Constitution, on which the Parliament has got power to make law. And if Parliament has made law and it is giving a direction to the state for its implementation, states have got no option but to implement it. But yes, if they want, they can definitely they can go and challenge it in the court of law. That's a different issue. But till the time law is there, they are supposed to implement it. The situation is entirely different with regard to the subject matter in concurrent is list 3, where there is a concurrent power available to the state government and the central government to make a law. Their state has got an authority that they can go to their legislature, get the law modified, get president's assent, and in the modified form, the law will be applicable to that particular state. But this kind of reservation or liberty is not available with regard to the subject matter which fall in list 1 of the 7th schedule of the Constitution. So therefore, states are bound to follow the law till the time it is in the statute book. Since the Parliament has passed it, they are supposed to follow it.
You know, so here lies the problem, J. Sai Deepak, you know, because yes, the center has the right, you know, to ask the states to implement it, but at the end of the day, the center needs the support of the states as well to carry out an exercise like this. So the states decide not to cooperate, what happens next?
So there are, I think, 2 or 3 levels to this. One is a question of propriety. Assuming that the union had chosen to interfere with any subject that falls exclusively within the state list, would the states have not raised the question of violation of federal structure, or that this is a dictatorship that is being run and that their fiefdom with respect to matters which are exclusively within their preserve are being interfered with? In which case, that's a two-way street. Reciprocity is the name of the game when it comes to federal structure. Particularly when we are not entirely federal, we are largely unitary with respect to certain issues, and particularly on the question of citizenship, as Mr. Malhotra rightly points out, entry 17 of list 1 anyway vests the entire issue within the exclusive preserve and domain of the Union Parliament, the central legislation, so to speak. So there can be no two ways about it. So what do they do then? Then you have no other option but to drag them to the courts. Ultimately, it will be a fight between the center and the state, and it's only the Supreme Court under Article 131 that has the jurisdiction over this, because this is a violation of the basic structure of the Constitution with respect to federal obligations. 2, I think there is a lot more clarity needed among the public with respect to what has been notified and what has not been notified, what is required and what is not required. On that issue, perhaps the PIP FAQs which have come out recently should have come out before. So here are, I think I am taking the opportunity to actually answer those questions. With respect to the Citizenship Amendment Act, the amended 6B or the newly inserted 6B, which deals with the question of these 6 communities. The authority which shall deal with those 6 communities for the purposes of registration through nationalization is yet to be notified. The conditions and the restrictions which are specifically mentioned again in section 6b are yet to be notified. Okay, so we still don't have a clear picture even with respect to how that is going to be implemented, which is precisely my statement that this entire thing is premature, that this entire agitation is premature. 2, so far you have only had an NRC Assam which is under Rule 4A of the Citizenship Rules of 2003. Therefore, you have a list of documents under List A and List B which was notified for the purposes of NRC Assam. Under Rule 4, no notification has been issued by the government with respect to documents needed for NRC India, right? However, in the FAQ that the government has come out with, it is rightly said that the documents are going to be of the same standard as the documents which were notified with respect to NRC Assam. The cutoff dates will of course vary. However, from let's say board certificates to any government issued document to ration cards to voter IDs to university certificates to licenses, almost everything, and the point I'm trying to make is the threshold is very, very low. So the clarification that the government has come out with is these will typically be the likely documents that shall be accepted for NRC Assam, is not any let's say knee-jerk reaction, but it is consistent with the position that's been taken with respect to NRC Assam. Now coming to the question of NPR. One, if the government wants to press ahead with the NRC, NPR is not mandatory, but it is optional under the structure. However, previously NPR has been used not for NRC, but for the purposes of preliminary procedure being completed for the census taking. Okay, so it could have twin objectives or twin utilities, so to speak. One, it is going to lend itself to the census in 2021, and it also provides for a ready database with respect to NRC, allowing the government to decide the kind of documentation that it would require from the people for the purposes of a nationwide NRC. Okay. Now, the larger question that people are bound to ask is, what about the money that is going to be spent on this entire exercise? Right. If it's a nationwide NRC, considering the amount that was spent only on one state with 3.3 crores and 19 lakh people being excluded and all of them queuing up before 100 tribunals for the appeal process. There you have to take a slightly different call. You can't be mercantile in your approach when it comes to national security. You can't be mercantile in your approach when it comes to the sovereign nature of the state and its integrity. If money needs to be spent on these kind of issues, you must spend that money the way you would spend it even on defense. Right. Whether or not there is a war, you spend every year as far as defense procurement is concerned, because you always anticipate trouble, and that's how you prepare when it comes to some of these issues. Similarly, when it comes to this, it is necessary for the government to know who is inside, who is, and those who are inside, are they necessarily Indian citizens or not? That is the fundamental question. Therefore, if you want to approach this question purely from an economic standpoint, then I think you have mercantilized, so to speak, the concept of a state and the very existence of a state. That can't be the way you approach these things.
You know, but economics also plays a big role, really, especially at a time like this. KV Prasad, the money that is going to be spent, since we are here, since we are talking about it, where is that money going to come from? Are the states also going to be contributing? How is all of this going to work?
If it's an act that, I mean, once the center has already made the allocations, the money has to come from here and flows from the center. States will be the implementers, and they will be as you said, they will have to give the staff necessary wherewithal to kind of collect the data, have the door-to-door enumerators, as has been done in the past. So even for census, you had enumerations, people going to village, house to house, knocking the doors and getting out the data. So all that will have to come. Money has to be found from the same pool as it is coming from as being allocated. So that should not be the issue. The issue is how do you go forward from where you are? That is it. And coming in this kind of an atmosphere, it raises unnecessary apprehensions. That is what is happening. And I think time and again, the kind of questions that were put at the press conference today to the minister, including this issue of 2014, where a reply of a minister in which they refer to the NRC basing on the NPR data. So even though they may be separate, but as it springs from that. So these are the issues that get robbed, and they get, even though they are separate in nature, but they're getting intertwined because of the kind of the atmosphere that has come out after the Citizenship Amendment Act.
Okay, all right.
I think Mr. Prasad has rightly pointed out, so far as the expenses are concerned, I think that should not be a concern, and Mr. Sai Deepak also said it's an essential requirement. So money has to be spent. If something is essential for in the interest of the country for formulating this scheme, you have to spend money on that. and probably government has already earmarked about 8,700 or 500 crore, whatever it is. Minister said in his press statement.
8,500, yeah.
8,500 or 700, whatever it is. That figure is coming, and I think that money will be coming from the Consolidated Fund of India. But the what is more important is the cooperation required from the state with regard to the manpower required for carrying out this kind of exercise, and without cooperation of the state governments, probably this kind of exercise, which is a marathon exercise, cannot be carried out. So large number of employees will have to be deputed by the state for carrying out this kind of exercise. And frankly speaking, I mean, it's not a thing which is a new thing which is coming. All apprehensions which have been expressed, or the opposition which is coming from some of the states, is only with regard to this issue, that ultimately it will relate to the NRC, and NRC will be finalized on the basis of the Citizenship Amendment Act. I think there probably some confusion which has been created need to be sorted out, so that the people are very clear that there is no discrimination, and any person who is living with proper document, who is already a citizen of the country, his rights will not be affected. And in any case, this National Population Register, I mean, saying that it's going to be a first time exercise again is a misplaced apprehension, as I have already clarified that in 2010 it was done, in 2015 it was revised, and it is only an updation of the same NPR which is taking place before the census, because two are connected under the Citizenship Act and the rules made there under in 2003.
Right. All right. So, J. Sai Deepak, let's talk about another issue now. You touched upon it in your opening remark. You spoke about how data is the new gold. So, are there privacy concerns at some level?
See, the privacy concerns that were aired with respect to Aadhaar, I think would continue to apply with respect to any kind of data that the government seeks. And the standard test, or the golden rule when it comes to any of the data collection, is one: what is the data being collected? What is the purpose of that particular data? Is the collection of the data proportionate with the object that is sought to be achieved? Then what are the safeguards that are being undertaken? What kind of liabilities that you're looking at? And would that data be delegated or handed over to private parties at some stage? The same kind of questions that were raised with respect to Aadhaar. But fortunately, when NPR was undertaken before, there was no Aadhaar, right? To the best of my understanding, in 2010 there was no Aadhaar.
No, there was no Aadhaar.
Right? 2011 is when the UIADI was actually constituted, from what I understand. In which case, the same kind of safeguards which were applicable to NPR before the coming into force of Aadhaar, I think would continue to apply. It's not as if previously people had questions with respect to it. However, what has certainly changed over the years, in the last 8 to 9 years, is increased awareness with respect to privacy, thanks to judgments of the Supreme Court also respecting or recognizing the right to privacy as a fundamental right. Therefore, questions previously which were not raised could be raised at this particular point of time. I just hope that the government, apart from getting its implementation right, also ensures that awareness and its public outreach when it comes to each of these programs. What is the NRC? What is the CAA? What is the NPR? And is at all, if at all there is any link between these three, that needs to come out very, very clearly. If that is done, I think at least 50% of it will be achieved, for the different reason that if the state governments take an unreasonable position, people of states can actually ask their state government. If the central government is being so clear in its position and there seems to be no disconnect and there seems to be no discord, what is the point of playing petty politics with something so essential and which has a bearing on national security? I think that is the ammunition that the central government must hand to every average citizen, so that they can question their elected representatives at the state level.
Okay, all right.
In fact, there is an interesting point which I would like to highlight here for the information of the viewers, that this Aadhaar and NPR in fact were discussed simultaneously in 2009 and 10. In fact, Home Ministry was very keen that there is no need to have Aadhaar because all the data is available
in the NPR.
In the NPR itself, so this will be a duplicity of the exercise. But the government in its wisdom at that time decided to implement Aadhaar as well as this. So whatever principle have been laid down for right of privacy by the Supreme Court in case of Aadhaar will also be applicable to NPR. Therefore, while formulating the policy, I think the government is considering that whatever is the basic data required, that of which was collected earlier also will definitely be collected. But whatever is affecting the right to privacy, more particularly your Aadhaar data, your PAN card or your voter ID, this is not mandatory. And if a person want to give details about it, then only it will be included in the IPR. But if he doesn't want to share this kind of data, he will not be forced because of the judgment of the Supreme Court given in the right to privacy case.
Certainly. All right. KV Prasad, what's the best way forward then?
Well, the best way forward, of course, remains that the trust needs to be built so that the people are very clear why a particular exercise is being done and what are the benefits the government intends to draw out of it. And also, as flagged by my co-panelists, the concerns for privacy of data. Because over the years, we have seen many a time there are reports of leakages, data being hacked, and so on and so forth on different platforms. And then we also have other issues related to it. So these are coming at a time, as I said, around this time of the time when post the Citizenship Amendment, there is a lot of apprehension in people's minds. So that clarity needs to be sent across from the government side that why an exercise is being conducted. The purpose of it is very clear. There's nothing new. In fact, if you remember, just to jog your memory back, 2003 when this act was done, Citizenship Amendment Bill. I remember attending a press conference where the then Home Minister, Mr. L.K. Advani, talked about a citizenship card. Same data.
Correct.
So the issue is, this is a debate that has been going on since that time. So then the government changed and things fell behind, and then came this a new concept of Aadhaar. So the database was available under NPR, but Aadhaar was a different. The kind of biometrics were introduced. So I think, and then that also didn't have a law till about 2015 or 2016. So this had been continuing in some form of fashion. I think we'll have to find a way out. Obviously, you need it for your national purpose, and you also need to assuage the sentiments that are being expressed all around.
Certainly. And Jai Sai Deepak, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
I certainly believe that the entire discussion or the, let's say, the confusion surrounding each of these issues stems largely from the legitimate as well as motivated apprehensions with respect to the CAA. It would be wrong on the part of the government or anybody to dismiss all concerns with respect to CAA coming from genuine quarters. That should not be clubbed with lumpen elements. Lumpen elements will do what they have to do. But those who are sitting on the fence and those who are genuinely asking questions, the government must continue to, let's say, proactively reach out to them the way it has over the last few days and try and address those concerns, because that will pave the way for something which is even more important, which is NRC as well as NPR. Because CAA is just one small issue, important, significant nevertheless, because it affects the rights of persecuted minorities. But now that you're talking of the entire country, this particular issue should not prove to be a stumbling block in the implementation of the optics with respect to both NPR as well as NRC.
Okay, all right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. As I leave, I'd like to wish all the viewers of The Big Picture a very Merry Christmas and a happy and prosperous New Year ahead.